Or show off your dogs. You can let your dogs talk like Sam's doing. Does it?
Poopy. Do you want to come up? You can't.
Oh, what a cute pup.
Okay,
Do you have sugar handy, Emma?
Sugar is in the kitchen. I have Kanga. She's sleeping at my feet.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right, a quick hello to the folks at Days at Dunrovin. This is Petey.
That's Petey.
That's Petey. Too cute. Oso was supposed to be here, but Jamie got the day wrong, apparently.
Oh, Jamie. Typical.
Jamie. All right. I think
Puppy wants to know if this is replayable.
I'm at. Wait, sorry. What, Sam? I couldn't hear you.
Puppy wants royalties. If this video is replayed.
Puppy can have all the royalties from this free workshop and its future dividends. Potentially 10 watchers. All right, I'm just gonna give it another couple of minutes to see if anybody else pops up who said they wanted to participate, and see if they email me frantically asking about it. I'm just also double checking that I posted everywhere I plan to post. Emma, did you get a chance to get links up on Facebook?
I did. I was trying. I think there's a way to embed it on the Facebook, but.
Oh, really?
That may be like a next time thing.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a few things that are going to be next time things, like my awesome slideshow. Who's growling?
Petey.
Petey growling? Did she growl on cue now? She's just growling.
She will do that after I've asked her to speak a couple of times and I stop looking at the trees. She'll growl to let me more.
I like hearing her growl. It's a good growl.
Yeah, it's pretty all right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we got it up everywhere it's going to go. I'm going to keep that up. Close this. This will become very important at some point. Lovely. All right. Like I said, a few other folks might pop in. I imagine that some people are struggling with Google Hangouts, as is typically the case. I'm just going to start with introductions. So make sure I'm following my lesson plan. If you want to, you can introduce yourself, your dog. First names only is fine. What you want to work on. And then if you feel like it, you can tell me the funniest thing your dog has done to date. So my name is Mackenzie. My dog's name is Oso. I'm his bad uncle dad, meaning I don't spend a lot of time with him. I'm trying to think of the funniest thing Oso has done. He's done a lot of funny things. Oh, we got somebody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey. Oh,
welcome.
Hi.
Hi, we're just about to do introductions. I was just starting. I'm glad you found us. I mentioned this before, but just a heads up, we're live streaming, just so you know. So if you're thinking of doing something really embarrassing, you don't want other people to watch, really think hard about it while I do the introduction. Okay, anyways, like I said, my name's Mackenzie. My dog's name is Oso. I thought of the funniest thing he's ever done before this. But he does a lot of funny, crazy things, so it's hard to pick one. I have my CBCC knowledge assessed, which just means that I have a certification in behavior. If you want to learn more about it, you can just Google CBCC dogs. Yeah, I've been doing clicker training and behavior modification for over 10 years now. So hopefully I can help you all problem shoot anything you might have questions about. So we'll do a round of introductions real quick, and then we'll move on to just a quick presentation. I'll just talk a little bit about how we think about changing behaviors that we think of as bad behaviors or behaviors we don't want to see. Okay, so who wants to go next? Anybody really raring to go?
Okay, I'll go.
Sam, take it away.
Yeah, I'm Sam. This is Puppy. I'm her guardian. I want to on I guess parade drive, or how to keep walking when a cat is laying on the sidewalk instead of being trapped there forever. Funniest thing Puppy's done. Gosh. I don't know. Today she tried to jump over a wall while I had her on a leash, and so she made it halfway up the wall, of course, until the leash ran out.
Practicing parkour.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Hilarious. Okay, who wants to go next? Thank you, Sam.
I can go next.
Emma, take it away.
Okay, I'm Emma. I have my CPDT KA, which is Certified Professional Dog Trainer Knowledge Assessed. Clicker training for the past 4 years. I have 2 dogs. And the question is, fun things they do. Is that right?
The funniest thing they've done recently. I didn't really answer it, so you're under no obligation.
Recently, they're both getting really good at making like Chewbacca noises on command, which I really like.
Like,
oh yeah, sugar especially.
That's amazing. If you can demonstrate that at the end of the evening, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Keeping things rolling. Karen, you're.
Yeah, I'm Karen, and this is Petey, and I would like to work on I think knocking at the door. She's still having a pretty rough time with that. She likes to bark about it. And the funniest thing she's done recently is she ate a parking ticket that I got the other day. So that was helpful.
Did they let you off for that?
I don't know. It's the first one I've gotten, so apparently you get one like whoops. So hoping
that was your "you are forgiven" parking ticket.
Yeah, you don't have to do
anything. Awesome. Okay, last up. I can't tell who it is because I can't see your face. Welcome.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Melissa. This is Yarrow. Come here, Yarrow. Come here. Come here, baby. Say hi. Yarrow is 10 months. He was born in South Korea, and he's a Korean Jindo. So he's pretty like undomesticated, primitive type of dog. And what we would like to work on is coming better on recall for distraction, like when he's around distractions. So he's like, I always have food on me and sometimes even toys, but he's just like, if there's a field mouse or another dog, or it's just kind of changing the last couple weeks or so. He's been running off from me and learning that he can get away with it if I don't have him on leash. And the funniest thing that he's done lately is he ate a bag of prunes. That was pretty
That's a pretty funny thing to do. Oso, I remember now something funny Oso did. Okay, so we were working, doing some stuff, and he he like found the like grossest. We were like, I was doing some dishes and like volunteering, and he came in to visit because I hadn't seen him in a while, and he found just the grossest oil trap and then lapped that up. So that was pretty funny. Also really just disgusting. Okay, moving on. Thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. Thanks for working with your dogs and showing up. I'm gonna try and do a quick, not too painful talk about dealing with problem behaviors. But I'm gonna try and pause a little bit, and you're gonna have to forgive me. I know it's gonna be a little bit like imperfect because it's my first time, and I want to do some screen shares, and I know it's gonna just go off poorly the first time, but we'll just try it. So I think just the first thing to say about problem behaviors is that ultimately there really are no bad behaviors. We just call some behaviors bad because we want the dog to do something else in that scenario. And it's good to remember that if you're trying to go about changing those behaviors, one of the best things you can do is start to reset your thinking and change your own habits on seeing them as bad. And there's some really good reasons for that. We have strong associations with what to do for bad behaviors, and most of those associations are punishment oriented. So saying no, saying saying or even more severely hitting, right? And the problem with that is that inhibiting behaviors through punishment usually means using extreme forms of punishment. So typically, in order for that, for positive punishment that we introduce, like physical punishment, for that to actually be effective with an organism, you have to punish pretty severely. So this is a really high shock or a really painful hit. And then you're always risking the idea that or the possibility that your dog associates that severe punishment with something that you don't want them to. So let's say, just to take one of your all's examples, let's say your dog doesn't leave the cat that you're walking by, in the case of Sam and Puppy, and you decide to pursue a punishment strategy to try and change that behavior. Well, one option, and this is something that traditional trainers, punishment-oriented trainers will do, is to correct, which means yanking on a leash pretty severely so that the dog has a pain response in their neck, as a way to say no or punish that behavior, and as a way to try and get the dog to associate attention to that animal with pain in order to get the behavior to stop. So if you do that, though, there's also the possibility that your dog associates that strong pain with you, with the leash, with some other random thing in the environment, right? And they can become fearful, they can become upset or angry, right? Or they can become like start to freeze, which is just a different sort of fear. But you don't really know at that point what their response is going to be, if it's going to be inhibitive or if it's going to lead to more arousal because they're actually starting to experience some sort of, increased adrenal response because of the pain. So using punishment, thinking of behaviors as bad, it leads us to the sorts of thinking to change those behaviors that can actually make them stronger, because oftentimes we don't punish to the level that it would actually inhibit the behavior. And so therefore we may be reinforcing the behavior through attention. And also it's out of our control. Even if it does work, it also carries the further problem of you thinking that punishing is the best way to accomplish behavioral change, which can lead to real problems later on. So let's say that the dog does associate the severe punishment with the cat and then starts to avoid cats. And the next time your dog starts to pay attention to something when you don't want them to, say a dog, you punish them and they associate the punishment with that dog, still working. But this time, instead of it being inhibitive, they're now reactive aggressive towards that dog because they see the dog, something really painful happens, and they try and fight off the dog. So we're going to try and shift the view from bad behaviors to just behaviors that we want to work on or change for our dogs. And that can be extremely helpful. If you find yourself frustrated or thinking my dog's bad, my dog's doing a bad behavior, the number one thing that you can do is just start to rethink, why is my dog doing that behavior? Okay, so just really quickly, that's my way too long blab about it. I'm going to just show you a couple dogs doing bad behaviors, and I'm hoping that you'll just chime in with a couple of options about why those dogs might be doing those behaviors that are not about them being bad, but them being instinctual. So here's our first one. So I apologize again that this is a little bit slow and wonky, but I'm going to try and share screen. And here's our first behavior. Okay. Anybody know?
It's awful.
Yeah, it's horrible. Why would a dog do that? Wait. Okay, somebody speak up. I missed it.
Not getting enough attention.
Not getting enough attention? That's a good reason. Anybody else? Not getting enough attention, not getting enough exercise. Maybe the dog has been taught to play tug without any sort of clear restraints on when it's appropriate, right? That could be a play behavior. That could be a drive behavior. But there's a lot of reasons why that dog might choose to do that behavior. But pretty much immediately, most people would say that that dog is doing a bad behavior. And then what would their response typically be?
Can you say that one more time?
Most typically, most of the time, people would respond to this by saying the dog's doing a bad behavior. And then typically, how would most people respond to that?
I mean, hitting their dog, yelling at it, shutting it outside.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. And unfortunately, what we typically find is that if you punish this, I would bet that this behavior is only this extreme because it's been punished, right? There's an emotional need that this behavior is satisfying. Maybe the dog doesn't get enough attention, so it's a need for attention. Maybe the dog doesn't get enough exercise, so it's a need to physically exert itself. And by trying to inhibit that and stop it through punishment, I bet that behavior is actually wrapped up to the point where this horrible thing happens, and then the dog is blamed, when really it's probably a series of interactions in which something that was much smaller was encouraged, not intentionally, but allowed the dog to build up to this level where, in order to get attention, or because of, looks like we lost somebody, or because of being too inhibited, they started to ramp up that behavior. So we want to watch out for those sorts of things. Okay, moving on to my notes, which are over here.
Okay.
So if we want to change behavior, instead of focusing on punishment, we need to start with management. So what is management? Management is all those things that we do to try and stop behavior by creating a plan, controlling our environment, and making sure that those emotional needs that bad behavior is being driven by are met without it rising to the point where the behavior that we don't want to see is happening. So let's talk about barking when somebody knocks at the door, right? That's a pretty natural behavior to have happen. A lot of dogs do it. It's something that they were probably bred for or people looked for in dogs for a long time. And so there's an emotional need driven through selection to warn people or warn each other about a possible threat, or potentially dogs getting excited because it knows that people are coming over. So there's a lot of different reasons why that dog might be doing it. But through management, we try and prevent that behavior. So some ways to manage that behavior would be to have the dog in a crate where they can't hear the person knocking, would be to have a sign on a door saying, please don't knock. Just text me or call me if you need to come in, right? And these are the sort of things that we choose to do to keep our dogs from offering those behaviors in order to help them move on to an alternative behavior. And so we control our environment, we manage the behavior so that it's not being offered. Yay, welcome back, Melissa.
I lost you.
I thought I just terrified you with my horrible GIF, but I'm glad that you were able to return to us. Okay, any questions about management? I'm doing way too much talking, so I'm going to start cruising. 5 seconds for questions. No questions? Great.
I guess I have a question because
Yeah.
I think I'm running into, like, at our house, we manage it really well, particularly the door knocking. But then I'll be up and the FedEx man comes and knocks on the door. And then I'm not quite sure how to manage that response.
Right, like the unexpected knocking at the door. Yeah. So this is tricky, and I think maybe we'll hold off a little bit and talk about this a little bit more in depth when we move on to workshopping here. But just to quickly answer it, and then we can come back to it later. We have to have like clear expectations, right? So while we try and manage behavior and we try and use management to stop behavior, there's going to be certain times when our dogs won't be able to meet our expectations in our daily lives. But the important thing is to learn from that and then try and create a plan. So a management solution would be, not to take our dog somewhere where they can demonstrate the behavior we don't want to see before they're prepared for it, right? So expecting like a problem behavior not to happen in a more unpredictable environment is not setting our dogs up for success, right? So it's not necessarily the best management. Or we accept the consequences of, once in a while our dog might make a mistake, but we think it's more important to socialize them in a new space, right? But this is kind of like my answer to that question moves into some of the stuff I want to talk about here in a second. Meanwhile, everybody look at Pete being so cute. So it may just be that that's not the space for a management solution, and you need to step up your training a little bit somewhere else. So that means like teaching our expectations and reteaching our expectations. Okay, so really quickly, if we have successful management going on, which means that our dog isn't getting constantly exposed to the thing that's triggering the behavior we don't want to see, we're not only walking our dog where there's loose cats underneath every car, and then and in a way that we're unprepared to have our dog, have a positive response to ignoring that cat, right? If we're doing that, if we're starting with management and creating those scenarios in which our dogs are being met, they're having their we've assessed what the emotional needs are behind the behavior, and we're creating more opportunities to practice the behavior that we want to see rather than the behavior we don't want to see, right? So we're not only taking them to places where the FedEx people are always knocking at the door really hard, irregularly, and they're only practicing barking at them. We're making sure that they're having ample opportunities to either not be exposed to it or to practice the behavior we want to see in the presence of the stimuli that creates that behavior, like the knocking at the door of the cat. Okay, so if we have good management, then we need to move on to teaching clear expectations and creating positive behaviors. And that really means just like practicing, teaching the behavior where the dog can succeed, right? Introducing whatever stimuli that like triggers the bad behavior is at lower levels where the dog can be exposed to it, but have success. So that doesn't mean the FedEx guy going, and everybody watch out because I'm going to knock. So if your dog is maybe going to bark at knocking you, this is a great time to give them treats as I do it. 3, 2, 1, knocking. Right? Like it's not that, it's we're practicing more the opportunity for our dogs to succeed, which by the way, I think all your dogs did at like this, right? So they're getting more opportunities to practice interacting with whatever the stimulus is at levels that they can succeed. So the cat's further away, the door being knocked on softly, or if it's a distraction in an environment, some sort like another dog at a distance where they can actually recall to you. And we're making sure that we set up their lives to do that. Then we teach those expectations. And it's important to teach those expectations. A lot of people end at management, but then their dog never actually improves in terms of behavior. And if you want your dog to do something different, you have to set it up so that they can actually practice where they can succeed. So having the knocking at a lower level, having, the prey in the environment somewhere where they can actually practice walking. And then another secret trick is practice a lot when you have the opportunity set up, right? It's helpful if you do find that cat underneath the car, if the dog doesn't want to move, if you can find a distance at which the dog wants to move, or you can rehearse the dog moving past the cat 5 feet, right? Or with better reinforcers, do it 10 times when you have the opportunity, or 20 times when they can succeed, and end on that rather than doing it once or twice and having them half succeed or not succeed at all. So finding opportunities to do those sorts of things helps empower them to meet our expectations. Okay, keep things no big deal and make bad behaviors good by putting that behavior on cue. So if you find yourself getting really upset or stressed out, you're not doing good management because you're not introducing the stimulus at a way in which your dog can succeed. And that means you need to just take a step back and set up scenarios in which your dog can have successes. So if you find yourself being upset, being mad, being stressed out, being worked up, it's a good sign that you're asking too much of yourself and your dog. And so you need to focus on, instead of practicing with the thing where your dog can't succeed, figuring out ways in which to practice where your dog can succeed. Okay, any questions at this point? Anybody want to see another funny GIF? Thumbs up for GIFs, or I can just keep talking at you. Karen's ready for a GIF, so we're going to watch a GIF real quick. All right, this one won't be so incredibly intense, hopefully. Bear with me. I'm finding a GIF. I lost my GIF page. There it is. Okay. Just to be clear, this is really funny. Sorry. Get ready for it. Here it comes. Oh, yeah. I just love Giphy. It's just like my favorite new thing. Are we also, is that a long enough GIF break? Do we need longer? It's just amazing. There's a bald dog riding a wave runner. I don't even know. I don't know if that's okay. I don't know if that's like a terrified dog, but it is really funny to me. Okay, moving on. I'm almost done with my bad lecture moment, and then we can have more fun by actually problem shooting some stuff. Just let me find my notes here again real quick. Any questions about anything so far?
So,
Okay.
I'm trying
Yes.
to think of your example and context that I'm working with my dog in. Like, for instance, he's got a little bit of toy aggression. So if I'm trying to set him up for success, I feel like I need to expose him to other dogs and food and toys, but maybe just with like one dog at a time and holding him and like rewarding him for each time. But I feel like I'm struggling with like the frequency of it because he'll really impress me and then he'll just like totally like flip out and attack a dog. Mostly with toys when he's loose and free running around the park. So maybe like what I'm hearing is I need to set him up for more success and do it in like a really controlled environment with the toy. And then allow him to have with another dog in the park, or something. So,
Yeah, here, let me just speak to that really quick. So,
you know,
the question is, if I heard you correctly, how do I set up my dog for success with resource guarding with toys and food, right? And we see he'll do a really good job, and then you'll be mostly, I hear, in the park, and dog will come up, you'll have a toy, and he'll get into a fight. So this is something where it's a little bit more complicated because we're dealing with a more complicated behavior when we're dealing with resource guarding, right? And there can be a number of things going on. So I don't want to oversimplify it and just say this is the answer right here. But an example of how you'd set them up for success with resource guarding is a park loose is a really uncontrolled environment, right? And you don't necessarily know how many dogs are going to come, what the other distractions are, etc., and what the other stressors are, right? So it's a triggered behavior, and maybe there's also something else in that park that can be triggering him to respond aggressive towards that other dog.
right.
So if you want to practice and work on it, the best way to work on it is like you are right now, right? You're teaching positive associations with playing with a toy in a scenario where I assume like you haven't experienced any reactive resource guarding with you, right? So he's practicing doing the right thing where he can have success, and it's not stressful, it's low level. Then you want to start introducing dogs, ideally, firstly, without any sort of thing to resource guard so that there's positive interaction. So his emotional driver of having to resource guard isn't there. And then progressively with checks in place so that if you do not assess the scenario right, nobody's getting hurt, right? Anytime there's like possibility of a fight, we want to set up our management plan so that our dogs are safe, first and foremost. So that could be muzzle training, leash training, barriers, right? Creating really positive associations with all those things along the way so that they're not adding to the stressors. And then, yeah, practice in more controlled environments where he and the other dog are familiar, ideally where there's 2 or 3 things keeping a fight from occurring, like a barrier, a leash, maybe a muzzle, right? Maybe everyone really knowing the plan ahead of time. And practice in a safe and controlled environment, things that you've already worked on. Playing tug with you, not with the other dog around, right? At a safe distance, right? Using distance to maximize that exposure. Of course, I can't talk you through that right now. That's a more complicated thing, but just to give you some examples of how you'd break that down in terms of setting them up for success, that's how I would do it. I'd practice not in an open space loose. I'd practice in a confined space with barriers, maybe on leash, where it's super safe so that they have a higher chance of success. And I would also go through and create really positive associations with all those things without the other dog being there. And then those positive associations, I try and generalize to the other dogs being there. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I just don't know. Because he's doing fine playing in controlled environments. Like me, dating twice, the other sitting and waiting for his turn. But when can I trust him to like be unsupervised? You know what I mean? It's like from one extreme to the next. I feel like.
Yeah, and this is part of why I didn't want to get too deep into reactivity, because it's a bigger, more complicated issue.
Yeah.
So
sorry,
I think No, you're all right. Problem shooting, something like recall is just a lot more. We're going to get further faster in this setup, and the reactivity issue is something we can deal with more privately or outside of this. But what you're talking about is generalizing a behavior that you've already seen, so making it so it's a more predictable behavior elsewhere, and that's probably going to take some time. Especially, there's just going to be a learning curve on it. Okay. I'm just going to get back to this just so that we don't go too far over time. And I feel like I've been talking at you all. And I think what you're all ready for and what I want to get on to is workshopping, where we actually break up your problem behaviors and work on trying to come up with some things to try. Okay, so teaching your expectations before you expect them. And that's exactly what we were just talking about. Coming up with ways in which the dog can rehearse the behaviors you want to see before they get to practice the behaviors you don't. So playing tug with them in a positive way with yourself before they get you're starting to expect them to have that positive association with other dogs is a great example. May not always like work, but trying to come up with ways in which they're practicing the behavior you want to see before they get a chance to practice the one that you don't, that can be super helpful. And then also just making self-control and leaving the things that they want and relaxation be the main things that they get the things they want in life, like attention, play, playing with dogs, getting in and out of the house, etc. So if we keep encouraging our dogs to do things like get super excited to go outside or get super excited to play, we're raising their arousal thresholds, and we're making it harder for them to actually practice the sort of self-control that we probably are going to expect of them later. And we're actually making it more possible for them to do things like ramp up into potentially reactive behaviors. So we can talk more about that. I figured rather than looking at my dumb face, you can look at Puppy for a second since she's being super cute. Okay. Trying to keep things no big deal. And you just knowing that when you're feeling stressed out, you're not succeeding. So trying to create some like practice more spending time where your dog is, you can think about your dog being good than being bad. And then slowly moving back into those areas where you've had problems before. Let's see. What else is super important here? I'm just going to say really quick, focus on the positive. When we think a behavior is bad, we have a tendency to highlight the negative. But if we can set ourselves up to focus on the positive, to think about how to notice and reward our dogs for doing the right thing, we're going to have a lot more success. Okay, so that's me. I'm done blabbing at you. I want to share one more GIF with you before we move on, just so that we start our workshop off on a high note. So give me 1 second. When we focus on our dogs doing the right thing, when we practice teaching them and like how to succeed and setting them up for success, what we end up getting to see is instead of our dogs doing the things we don't want to see, we see a lot more of our dogs doing amazing things like this. Right? Okay. All right, let's do some workshopping. So the way I see this workshopping going is we'll take turns just talking about each one of your problem behaviors and then trying to practice how do we set up a management plan for our dogs. And anybody can chime in at this point talking about like how could you manage that behavior. I think it's important that you get a chance to actually practice with each other's problem behaviors, because the more you get to practice thinking about what management looks like, what setting them up for success looks like, what teaching them how to do the thing you want to see looks like for each other, the more you'll be able to apply those ideas to your own dog. So don't be too shy, but if nobody's talking, I'll end up giving you my ideas, which are probably the worst ideas to have. So does anybody want to start first? Do I need to call on somebody? Emma, do you want to be my first victim and just throw out a problem behavior that we can all practice on real quick? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
How about just something easy like jumping on the counter?
Great. Awesome. Okay, so let's just take that step by step. How do we manage, or first off, why would our dogs jump on the counter? What are some reasons that our dogs might do that?
To get the What? Food on the counter?
Yeah. Oh, Mackenzie's muted.
Why would your dog jump on the counter?
To get the food.
Food on the counter, the food we keep talking about.
I guess people said food all at the same time, so I couldn't hear anything. Sorry. Great. And why do dogs go for food?
Because they like food, they like eating it. It's a reward.
Because they're hungry. Yeah, because they need food. We all need food. Dogs need food. Some food's better than others. If you restrict food, it has higher value, which might motivate jumping on the counter. Also, maybe it's also because they've jumped up on something and eaten something in the past, so they've already been rewarded for it. Okay, so we know the emotional drive. Food is good. Dogs need food to live. That's why they're jumping on the counter to get food, right? So how do we manage that emotional drive?
Feed them.
Don't leave food on the counter.
Exactly. So we remove the motivator, right? We control it. We don't leave food on the counter. We make sure that they're getting that drive rewarded elsewhere, right? So it's being satisfied. And actually, the dogs who don't jump on the counter most are the ones who also get table scraps and the other awesome things that you might give your dog that are highly rewarding, right? Because they know how to access that stuff without having to jump on the counter. So maybe increase their access to something that they've been restricted from in a positive way. So ask them to do a really awesome leave it where they ignore it for 10 seconds in order to get it. So they're practicing self-control in order to get that. Okay, so that would be good management, right? Making sure that their emotional drivers are being met by making sure they're well-fed, getting a diverse diet, and also controlling when food is on the counter. It doesn't mean you never put food on the counter, but if your dog's already demonstrated jumping on the counter, you make sure that food's only there when they can't get to it, and especially when they can't get to it, and you're prepared to reward them for not going for it at increasingly difficult levels. Okay, next step. How do we make that? How do we teach that? I kind of jumped into this, but let's just throw out a couple of really quick ideas for how to teach what we would like to see them do with the food on the counter. Anybody?
Reward them for not jumping on the counter or ignoring food on the counter.
Yeah, awesome. And how would we start that?
You could be eating your dinner and then they look away from you eating your dinner. You could reward them or reward them for laying across begging.
Yeah, those are two great ideas. But even going further back, we could just start with training leave it early on, right? So ignoring food in your hand in order to get the food that's in your hand, right? And then we can generalize that behavior through reteaching it all the way up to making your dinner and rewarding them in a different place for ignoring it. Anybody have anything to add there? Okay, so we problem shot one. Let's actually take one that we're working on. Karen, I'm just going to start with you. You're my first victim. Okay, so PD's barking when people still knock at the door.
Mm-hmm.
Talk us through when it's still happening and what you've already tried to do to address it.
Happening mostly on the surprise. So if we know someone's coming and they're following directions on the door, we just give a lot of treats when they come in and everything's fine. And then it's the surprise now. She's startled and then barks quite a bit. And in that situation, I'm usually going for treats and trying to come back from the door and just jackpotting onto her.
Okay. So let me just review real quick to make sure I understand what you just said, since I was kind of getting some jumpy audio. I don't know if you guys were. So you're having success when people come to the door, they read the sign on the door, and you're expecting them to come. Is that right? And she's not barking so much then?
Yep.
But when people don't read the sign on the door, or it's a surprise to you or her, she's still barking when there's a surprise knock. Okay. So we've already kind of covered earlier what the emotional driver is for barking, right? It's alerts usually. Sometimes it can be out of excitement. Sometimes it can be out of fear. But since we're already having some success, we can kind of move up to where we are now rather than working on the other stuff. So what's a management solution for this problem behavior? Does anybody have an idea?
So maybe distract the dog by a word.
Sorry, can you say that one more time? Distract the dog by what?
Like a higher reward than just treats. No, because she said she's giving it when they want barking. But if they're barking by them, maybe there's something really special that will kind of distract them to come to you with. I don't know.
So increasing the value of our reinforcer?
Yeah.
That might be something to help out with. So create, like, saving a really high value reinforcer for when there's a surprising bark, or sorry, a surprising knock, so that if it's a emotional driver that's fear-based, she's starting to have a more positive association with those really scary, unexpected knocks that maybe are driving her to bark out of fear. She's starting to have more positive associations with it. So that would be a good thing to try. So like restricting a really special higher value reinforcer for just those scenarios. Hopefully something that you can carry with you so that if they happen somewhere else, you have it and you're only using it in that scenario. So that's less scary, right? Any other management ideas?
I wonder too, like just for the higher jackpot, if you put it in a container near the door, so you're not, where it's my treat bag, but somewhere easy to grab.
What would be a higher reinforcer for you in that situation?
What are you using right now for treats?
Usually that.
Sorry, Emma, can you say that one more time? I think your audio messed up.
I was just curious what you're using now for treats when there's this surprise knocking.
Yeah. The prize knocking treats are often dehydrated hamburger. She's a pretty good one. She's pretty into it. Yeah.
So we could mix that up with something that she's not gotten before, but that you try once and she really enjoys. And then making sure that it's something that you can carry with you and just always have on you, but you're saving for those scenarios. That's a good solution. Any other management ideas for this? Okay, so one management idea would be, putting the sign somewhere else so that they, like FedEx, UPS, they're notoriously the worst about reading signs and actually following them. So this can be hard. Maybe they actually read it. So maybe they're just missing it because it's right on the door. And so you can set them up for success by putting it on the gate or somewhere further back where they have to encounter and read it in order to get through, or they're more likely to have a few seconds to think about what they just read before they act, right? They have a pattern of behavior, which is rush, up, and knock. So it's harder to change that. So by giving them a few seconds, it makes them more likely. A couple other things: inhibit access to the door. If you feel like it's the further away from the door she is, the more likely she is, or the less likely she is to bark. So that would mean maybe putting up like a baby gate or something further back so she can't get that close, right? Other management ideas that I can come up with: playing like music at a low level, but where it softens the noise of the knock, or putting up an alternative to knocking near the door that also signals your attention, that's going to get them to do it right away. So having a soft knocker on the door, so they're not immediately doing this, but you can do something that's padded. It says use this to knock, right? So it's, instead of being like a really loud pop, 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 it becomes a boff, 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 maybe more softened, but that would be another management solution. Okay, how do we, one more thing, what are some ways in which we can pursue teaching the behavior we want to see once things start to get to the point where it's just surprising? Because that's tricky. That's harder for a lot of people, making that transition from I have a totally controlled environment with everybody doing what I want to do to there's a UPS guy knocking on my door.
I've imagined sort of setting up the surprise. So I know it's coming, but she doesn't. And then being really just ready for that. I've yet to do that, but that's the plan.
Anybody else have ideas about how to help prepare her for more surprising knocks?
I would say if you could have the knock be a cue, like if you have a baby gate or you have a crate or a mat, and you can practice knocking softly and then having her go to the mat. So then even if it's a surprise, like the knock itself is the cue, like I run away and I go to this place. That's really awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. So that's getting a little more sophisticated, but we're now changing up what the knock means. So that's playing with the emotional driver. So the knock, instead of being something that means, oh, something scary is about to happen or something exciting is about to happen, it very specifically means go and lay somewhere, right? And you do that just like you teach your dog to go lay when you say it, right? Pairing that sound with the behavior, which we don't really have time to get into right now, but that's a great solution. Anybody else? All right, so we got some things for Karen to try. Let's move on to Puppy and the cat. Is everybody okay with going a little bit over today? You can just thumbs up me if that's okay, or thumbs down me if it's not okay. You got one thumbs up. Sam's medium on going over. Sam, you can go. You can take off after yours if you need to. And we'll only go about 10 minutes over, I think. We're gonna try and do the next 2 in 5 minutes each, which means we'll do them in 7, then we'll be 10 minutes over. Okay, I'm muted. Sam, tell us about Puppy.
She is wildly distracted and driven to chase deer, cats, and squirrels. I've had some success with squirrels. She's really great at leave it with food. She's now great with other dogs and distraction and recall in those contexts. But if it's deer or cats, and most of the time squirrel, especially if they're running, we're fucked and she's gone. Or was just frozen on a leash. With cats, I can't get her to look at me, to respond, to come for treats, to receive food. She just stares and literally just lays down. And yeah, I feel at a loss.
Great. So the behavior we're trying to teach is passing or ignoring prey animals, especially when they're exhibiting prey characteristics like running away. Okay, so anybody want to chime in about what the emotional driver is for this behavior?
Seems like instinct, like wanting to chase them. You're muted, Mackenzie.
I got it. Sorry. A lot more clicking than I'm used to doing when I have to talk and teach people. I gotta get used to that. So prey drive, right? Which is a very similar emotional driver to what? Getting up on counters, looking for food. It's it's deeper than that, but it's the thing you do before you eat, and it's instinctual. It's heavy, it's deep, right? Okay, so we identified the emotional driver probably. Okay, management solutions. Anybody want to chime in on some ideas for management for this?
Okay, I'll go. I avoid going to places where there are deer, squirrels, and cats. If I think there might be, she's on leash. I bring really high value treats, you know, to try to work on it. But, you know, there's only so much planning around cats you can do. Yeah.
Great. So avoiding, right? Trying to not expose her to those things, especially when you're not prepared. Using high value rewards and making sure she's on leash or restrained. Anybody have some alternative ideas about other management strategies before we move on to training solutions? Training what to do? I think those are pretty good. Okay, so let's hear about some things that you could practice teaching to try and set your dog up to better ignore prey. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, my practice with squirrels is getting her to break her attention with them, essentially, and rewarding any kind of, and this is kind of counter to something we've talked about, but yeah, any looking away from a squirrel is rewarded with treats or with moving closer to the squirrel. And then by not like completely losing her fucking mind and running at the squirrel, she's being rewarded by being able to go toward it. And this is something I can only do when she's on leash, and I am absolutely prepared to do this. But that seems to have helped with squirrels anyway.
So that's getting into something we haven't talked about tonight, but rewarding with the behavior that they want to perform for a behavior that is counter to that. We call that Premack's principle. They call it grandma's rule. So you can play video games after you eat your peas, right? That can be pretty successful because we know what the primary reward is in that scenario. It's getting to chase the squirrel. So if we get an alternative behavior that's not chasing the squirrel, and we can do it in a controlled way where the dogs and squirrel are in no danger of getting injured, like on leash, we can reward with approach or chasing the squirrel. Okay. Other management solutions, I think we can just move on to how do we train an alternative behavior? How do we teach the expectation that we have, which is ignore this thing, right? So Premack's principle, employing Premack's principle is a great idea. If you have another idea, raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to launch into it for the sake of time. Okay, so this is leave it training, right? This is ignoring the thing that we want in order to get the thing that we want, right? So we've had success with leave it from what I hear with food, really good. In a controlled environment, that's your house, right? But we have yet to generalize that behavior to prey animals, right? So how do we generalize a behavior successfully? Well, we create a lot of different scenarios that are on the way to what we ultimately want to see. So do you have to work with cats to leave cats? No. Working with squirrels should be helpful though, right? But even more importantly, can we practice more leave it with food outside of the house in less controlled environments, right? Other things that your dog may want. With people, if your dog's really people motivated, because you can control them easier, right? With unexpected things, right? Practicing leave it with unexpected food rewards. And you can do that by leaving out food where you know where it is so you can control your distance, and then ask for leave it before, and then offer the food to your dog that you know is acceptable to take after they've left it, right? So setting up scenarios in which you have more control, but they're in more chaotic or uncontrolled steaming environments for your dog. Leave it with toys out and about rather than just at your house, right? So that's a combination of like using management and training, set up training scenarios. And yeah, like if it's a really extreme behavior that you're really interested in getting your dog over, cat in a crate, right? That's comfortable somewhere you can do. Animals that are under control, asking them to leave them in controlled setups. And sometimes that's what it takes, especially your dog's already rehearsed a lot of times the behavior you don't want to see. Does it make sense? Any questions about that?
Yeah.
That's good. That's good generalization, right? Is creating scenarios in which they can rehearse the behavior that you want to see. It's amazing too, especially if you can set up ways where they can go and explore, right? There's a lot of cats who would be fine meeting a dog if you can set up a scenario in which that cat is under control and your dog practices leaving it, maybe in an interior situation like your apartment or somebody else's apartment first, so that they're not, you know, out in the wild in the environment, the cat's not just only running away. Then you should be able to generalize that behavior further. Okay. Any other questions there? Let's do recall real quick and then we'll call it a night. All right, Melissa, you're up.
Okay. So when I first got Yale, he was responding really well with food and coming to me like on command. And I think I might have given him a little bit too much freedom to begin with. Like, he's in the park and he'll come most of the time, but not all the time. So I've been like, oh, it's great. And but recently, yeah, it's like he'll see a distraction and he's off, and he's learning that he doesn't have to come to me all the time. So now I'm thinking I need to really, Yarrow, come here, step it back a little bit. It's just hard because he's already had so much freedom.
Okay, so recall is going well, but we're seeing diminished response in response to distractions especially. So what's our emotional driver? Anybody want to chime in with that?
Wanting to explore things that are interesting to the dog, like playing with other dogs, sniffing stuff, running around, toys.
Right. Exploring the environment's an important thing for any animal to do to survive, right? So it's just, if they're off leash, there's a lot of emotional drivers leading them away from you, right? So building up a strong behavior of coming back to you, especially somewhere with a lot of distractions like other dogs, potentially prey animals, stuff like that, you're fighting a lot of emotional drivers, not just one. Okay. So we have an emotional driver, and it's understandable. Like, exploring the environment is something every animal needs to do to fully realize their capacity as a being in this world. Okay, some management solutions. Anybody?
Well, I've tried giving him treats, like when he comes, and I always have treats on me, so it's like he just, it's like, I'll take it or leave it, you know?
Practicing recall in a very controlled environment to begin with, even on leash. That's how I started with Puppy, because she was like completely insane when I, met her. Practicing recall in a yard, and then practicing recall with like a dog and a friend who know what's going on. That was helpful for me, at least. Like starting really small, and then when your success rate is like 10 out of 10, then you can like take it to the next thing. That was useful for me anyway.
Even like a long line would be really good to practice if you're getting good recall on a leash, to like do varying distances on a long line before he actually gets to go off leash, especially around distractions. I mean, long line would be a great way to build a recall in high distraction environments.
So a long line, just in case people don't know what that is, that's just a longer leash, basically 20 foot, 15 foot. You can use certain kinds of rope. Before you use one, definitely look up how to use one, because you can hurt yourself or your dog with it. Don't attach it to the neck, right? Definitely practice it attached to a harness for safety's sake, and don't just grip it once the dog's already running away. You want that long line should like act like it's not even present if you're working on recall. So you should never wait until the dog's at the end of the long line lunging at something. You want to be practicing where your dog's always coming before they get to the end of the long line. So I think those are some great management solutions, just to reiterate. So making sure your dog is restrained or on leash or in an environment that's not too distracting to recall. So maybe what happened was we kicked it up to too distracting of an environment, in which case, and the environment itself became more reinforcing than the rewards. Remember, if we give a lot of rewards, the reinforcement value of those rewards diminishes, especially when there's something else like exploring the environment that your dog's probably being restricted from for, 23 hours of the day, maybe 22 hours of the day, right? So your food reinforcers can be less reinforcing than the environment itself. So you want to be making sure that access to that environment is happening when you offer it to them in a controlled way, and that you're getting good behavior in response to it, right? So it's just like getting to chase the squirrel. You can chase the squirrel if you can leave it first, right? And you're on leash, and I said it was okay. Not just because we happen to be there and there happens to be a squirrel, right? Okay, and then just gradually, progressively teaching what we want to see, and especially if we've started seeing what we don't want to see, we need to back that way up to where we can get success. So practicing and I'm just reiterating what you all have already said, so kudos to you. Practicing in environments where we can have success and waiting for our success rate to be really high before introducing new environments or new distractions to rehearse what we want to see again, right? Practicing on a long line or a leash so that they're practicing recalling when they can't actually go chase things. And then also recalling to get to go and explore the environment, right? So they have to recall because they're on a leash, and then you can let them loose if it's safe to go and explore, and they're getting to rehearse that. So backing it up, making sure that you've really taught clearly what you expect, where they can succeed, rather than expecting them to do it where they can't. Okay, anything else to add, anybody, to that? I think that's pretty good next steps. I think we all got things to try. Just because you have things to try doesn't necessarily mean they'll work, but if we know how to break things down and we can come up with other ideas and kind of successfully diagnose, are we dealing with the emotional needs? Are we using management to help our dogs succeed? Are we breaking things down in a way that they can actually learn what they are expected to do before we expect them to do it? Most behavioral problems will diminish. And if they're not, then that's definitely a sign to get some help, hang out with people who can give you good ideas. One last chance to ask questions before we call tonight. Great. I just want to say a couple things real quick. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for doing this, my inaugural online behavioral workshop. I really appreciate you showing up to do it. This is a totally free service, but if you do feel like making a small donation to make sure I can keep doing it, you can go to my donate page at nobaddogs.org. And I just want to really quickly say thank you to all the people who are supporting me on Patreon. That's Jim, my dad, Amelia, Diane, my mom, Jimmy, my friend, Tammy, my friend and former client, Megan, my friend, Josh, my friend. And if you'd like to be one of them, you can go to patreon.com/Canner to support. Thanks. I really do appreciate you all taking the time to do better by your dogs. It's the biggest reward you can give me. So I appreciate you doing that. And thanks for joining us. I'm going to stop the broadcast, but if the folks on the Hangout want to hang out for a second to ask any questions off air, that's great. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week for puppy class. Bye.